The studio behind one of gaming's most absurd meme games somehow created one of the most methodical, engineering-focused factory builders ever made. And that journey? Well, it's way more interesting than you'd probably think. Satisfactory's origins go all the way back to 2010. 9 students from the University of Hovda in Sweden were studying game development. From day one, certain individuals just clicked, and while working together over the next 3 years, they slowly became a close group. While they were still studying, they made a mod for Unreal Tournament, which was a very popular game at the time, and entered into a competition run by the company Epic Games. Their unique idea was so good that Epic Games reached out with positive feedback, telling them the game had potential and encouraging them to consider turning it into something real. That feedback was enough motivation to help them make it happen. Right after graduation, the group started Coffee Stain Studios. They turned their Unreal Tournament mod into their first commercial game, Sanctum, a mix of tower defense and first-person shooter games. And Sanctum's success quickly funded the sequel, which came out less than 2 years later. After that, they created Goat Simulator in 2014. It started out as a joke during an internal game jam, but they released it on Steam anyway, where it became a massive hit and made the studio back more than $100 million. By the end of 2015, they'd wrapped up Goat Simulator and began to brainstorm what would come next. In the beginning of next year, 2016, Coffee Stain prototyped multiple game concepts to find their next project. The developer who originally pitched the concept of the Sanctum mod proposed a new idea. He had been playing Factorio and wanted to make a first-person factory building game, and his team felt they could apply the same approach they used with Sanctum, taking an existing genre and making it into a more immersive first-person experience. By summer 2016, after less than 10 weeks of prototyping, they knew Satisfactory was the game they wanted to make. Development started in June 2016. For the next 3 years, their goal was to create a playable early access version that could fund ongoing development. The team built Satisfactory in Unreal Engine 4. They had prior experience with the engine from their work on Sanctum, so obviously working with it seemed like the natural choice for the project. It initially started as a potential Sanctum sequel using the same codebase as its core foundation. Satisfactory still contains elements from Sanctum, including the build gun system, but as development progressed, they decided to make it a separate game. The team looked at Factorio for the factory automation mechanics and drew from Sanctum for the first-person building experience. But it is when they leaned into the exploration aspects of it and studied games like Subnautica and No Man's Sky that they were really able to define where Satisfactory fit into the space genre. Satisfactory kind of started as Factorio in 3D, but as development continued, it quickly became a standout classic in this game genre. The team faced a key decision during development. Satisfactory had room for endless additional features, but they had to determine what the core experience should be. They added more combat features only to realize it distracted players from the core concept. They also added stamina, but it made the game more annoying to play, so they opted to remove all of them before the product was finished. The real challenge they faced was focusing on what made the game distinct rather than just adding more complexity to the control choices. But it turned out, the name itself had been pointing to the answer all along. The game was about satisfaction, the feeling players get from building efficient, functioning factories. The learning curve in this game is also amazing. So many other factory building games fail at this, like Factorio. That's not to understate what an incredible game it is, but it's just so hard to understand at first that people can easily get confused along the way. I even talked about this in my last video. People found Factorio too complex, and because of this, they had too many refunds during the early days until they optimized the first 10 minutes of gameplay. But in Satisfactory, the game teaches you everything very gradually. It's almost like the gameplay loop itself is a tutorial. You wonder what's going to happen next, what factories you'll build, and almost anything you need to know is introduced exactly when you need it. The milestone system is truly genius too. Instead of overwhelming you with all its possibilities at once, the game locks the higher tier items behind milestones. To unlock them, you need to produce specific items, which naturally teaches you how the production chains work. By the time you're building nuclear power plants, you've spent dozens of hours mastering the basics. The complexity builds so naturally that you don't even realize how much you've learned until you've learned it. The game also doesn't punish experimentation. You can rebuild your factory without penalty. Resources are infinite, just time-gated, which removes the fear of doing it wrong. Even the user interface is designed for gradual learning. Early buildings have simple interfaces, but as you unlock more complex machinery, the interfaces gradually introduce new concepts. That way, you're never thrown into the deep end. Unlike many factory building games, the world is not procedurally generated. It is a single, massive handcrafted map, roughly 45 kilometers squared, with every cave, cliff, and resource node placed with purpose. In a devlog from 2018, one of the developers was seen live streaming the design of a cave on YouTube while answering questions. In another video, a level designer said that he learned later on that besides looking good, the map also should be more functional on a consistent basis for players. For modeling, the team uses Blender. Just one machine sometimes takes 2 months to finish, like the manufacturer machine. They also added small details and animations to give the machines personality, so they feel like more than just cold, mechanical products used to progress forward, like the way the drone's antennas move. Another example is how they gave the portable miner a robot/character vibe with small details like squinting its eyes when it hits the ground to show a solid reactionary effect. The early access launch in March 2019 was a massive success, but also a huge responsibility to place on the team's shoulders. They suddenly had hundreds of thousands of players, and their feedback shaped everything that came next. During early access, they released major updates labeled Update 3, Update 4, Update 5, etc. Each of them adding new systems, mechanics, and immense quality of life improvements. The community became an integral part of development too. Players found bugs the team never anticipated, and they created builds that stressed the game engine in unexpected ways. They provided feedback on what felt good and what felt tedious, as well as which worked wonders when the team was trying to determine how to configure new things. This feedback loop was invaluable for the development because now they had the ability to make decisions based on actual player behavior, not just their assumptions. One of the most interesting aspects of Satisfactory's development is how the team approached storytelling. I've played countless games in this genre, but I never gave much thought to their narratives. Planet Crafter, for example, arguably one of the most amateur games I've ever played, even had a story. You're a prisoner sent by the galactic government to terraform a Mars-like planet. To be honest, you might not care about the story while you're playing, but from a game design perspective, it's actually fascinating. Our brains are wired to respond to narratives. Think about it. If Satisfactory had no story at all, it would feel strange. You'd inevitably start asking, why am I here? What's the purpose of all this? Without any context, even the most engaging gameplay loop feels hollow. At some point during early access, players started asking the developers, what's the point of this game? Why are we building all these factories? In response, the team decided to craft a story for Satisfactory. They designed the narrative to be contextual, there for players who wanted to engage with it, but never interrupting the core factory building gameplay for those who just wanted to tune the other aspects out and build. Unfortunately, writing the story became a real challenge for the team. The question became, what can we add that doesn't require a massive budget or put enormous pressure on the team to finish in time? The solution was elegant. You play as a pioneer, an employee of a massive interstellar corporation called Fix-It Incorporated. You're dropped onto an alien planet with a single objective: exploit the planet's natural resources, build a massive space elevator, and ship components back to Fix-It. The game's narrative is delivered primarily through the voice of ADA, your AI assistant. You also encounter drop pods from the other pioneers who didn't survive their missions along the way to keep things more interesting. But there was another major challenge during early access. Satisfactory had a serious performance problem. Players were building massive factories with millions of items, and the game had to render everything in full 3D while finding ways to make it run without melting people's computers. The most effective solution was switching the level of detail. When you move away from your factory, The game swaps the detailed machines for simplified low-poly versions that look acceptable from a distance but require almost no processing power. As you walk back, it swaps them back to high detail before you notice the transition. Without this, looking across a large factory would crash most PCs. The game also uses culling. It doesn't render anything your camera can't see. This is standard in most games, but it's particularly important in Satisfactory. If you build walls around your factory, the interior isn't rendered at all until you're looking inside it. The game only processes what's actually visible. The conveyor belt system required a complete redesign. Initially, every item on a belt was a separate 3D object with its own physics calculation, and it killed performance immediately. The solution was to treat conveyor belts as fixed paths rather than physics simulations. Items don't actually move in the traditional sense, they're rendered as instances along a predetermined path. The game tells the GPU to draw one iron ore model at specific positions along the belt. It only tracks items at entry and exit points. Everything between is just a visual representation following the path at a fixed speed. The world is divided into chunks that can be loaded and unloaded as needed. Each chunk can use up to 1.5 gigabytes of memory, so this chunking system prevents the entire map from overwhelming the system at once. The developers also used save files from YouTubers who deliberately tried to break the game, building absurd factories with millions of items and chaotic layouts. These saves acted as extreme stress tests. If those could run at 20 FPS, normal factories would run smoothly. After 5 years in early access, Satisfactory finally launched version 1.0 in September 2024. By January 2026, Satisfactory had sold 8 million copies and made at least $200 million in revenue. The launch was incredibly successful, and the game easily peaked at over 100,000 concurrent players on Steam, breaking its own previous records. Reviews remained overwhelmingly positive, with players praising how the team had actually finished what they started without taking away from what made it special. Something I noticed from this development story is that so many other successful games come from pure luck. The developers don't really know what they're doing until they've actually done it. They make the game they want to play, and some of them get lucky. They reach a big market by mistake and make millions of dollars. But Satisfactory is not like them. Developers didn't just pick one idea and hope it worked. They spent months in a prototyping phase where they intentionally tried to break their own ideas. They built small, ugly versions of dozens of games. If a prototype wasn't fun within the first few days, they moved to another one. Their first project, Sanctum, was a niche experiment. Their second project, Goat Simulator, was a viral hit, but the team knew they couldn't just rely on memes forever. The secret to Satisfactory's success was their ideation process. They didn't start making Satisfactory because they felt lucky. They started it because after 10 weeks of testing, it was the only idea that proved it had potential. And they understood the psychology of the player, the need for order, the joy of efficiency, and the satisfaction of a job well done. And this is the most important lesson from this development story. So many game developers make this mistake, and it's so easy to fix it. You can literally increase your success rate before you start developing a game. The only thing you need is an ideation process. So before developing your next game, spend at least 2 weeks on video game ideation. You can even make prototypes and test them. But remember that the core idea is very important.